Welcome to the No Cams podcast. I'm Sunny G.
I'm Akash.
I'm Jason.
And here on the No Camps podcast, we discuss a variety of film, TV, and other interesting topics. And today we'll be talking a little bit about what we've been watching. So I'm going to kick it off to Jason, who's been watching a ton of stuff, it seems like. Jason, what have you been watching?
I don't know which one to start with first. I guess I'll start with, let's start with American Vandal. I finally finished American Vandal on Akash and Sunny's suggestion. I started the show with Sunny. We watched the first couple episodes, and then I actually really liked it. I kind of just was waiting for the right time to revisit it, and I just blasted through the whole thing. I just binged the whole show, and it's great. It's just a great show. Yeah. And we were kind of talking about it in our Slack. It's a mind fuck because the first couple episodes, it's hilarious because they're just talking about dicks and how seriously they're talking about dicks drawn on cars and how blasé they are with that word dicks. And it comes down to how the dick is drawn.
Ball hairs.
Ball hairs is a big part of the show. And so it's just like, you have to laugh about it. But then 7 episodes in, you're really invested into what's going to happen. You have to see how it's going to resolve. And the layers that they add to these characters, to these stories, the whole montage, there's 2 or 3 episodes where they go through the alibis. And it's just incredibly complex. And whoever wrote this story added such complexity to a story about dicks being drawn on cars, like teacher's car. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the eureka moments that they find, and that kid, the actor that plays the main character, his name is Jimmy Tatro.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he is hilarious. He is the perfect dumb douchebag that you also sympathize with, that you want to believe, you root for him. You don't want it to be him. And there's times where you think it's him and he's been lying the whole time. And he's the main character. He's the protagonist. And
he's the perfect bro.
He's such a bro. He was in 21 Jump Street, if you remember. He was one of the football players in 21 Jump Street. And he was a total douche bro in that one deal. He's great at it. And he's in that little Dicky Freaky Friday video.
Adam Devine from Workaholics, the main guy.
yeah.
They have very similar personalities and demeanor, whatever.
Yeah. They could play the most unlikable person in a room, both of those guys, and he does it so well. And you guys said it in the last time we brought it up. They depict high school so perfectly, the parties, the interactions of the character. The kid that plays Alex Tromboli, the one who originally outs him out.
Yeah. I hate that guy.
He's such a douchebag, man. And he plays a guy desperate to be popular. So I don't know how they did it. It almost seems like a real story that happened to us when we were in high school, and now they kind of grew up a little bit. This mockumentary is kind of fun, so they just extrapolated this fictional story out of this. It feels so it's rooted in reality in such a great way. And I mean, I completely love it. So I'm glad you guys suggested it because it's perfect. It's documentary now, but they did it throughout a whole season. So you're invested. That story inside and out.
So what did you think of the ending? Because I don't know if you remember from our discussion, I actually kind of fell out of love with the show as we got towards the ending because it got too it went from a documentary thing to a little bit more of a drama story, and I didn't really enjoy that. I mean, to your earlier points, I really love the true crime aspect of the whole documentary, how they redo the whole the party, the night of the party. They'll use people's Snapchats and Instagram feeds to kind of piece in the whole night.
Yeah.
I love that part, but at the end, they got very high school drama, soap opera-ish for me, and I really fell out of love with the show at that point.
Well, what do you mean by getting high school soap opera drama?
I mean, from what I remember from the show, it started being more about relationships, and it started, in my mind, and from my recollection, it left the whole documentary format and kind of just went on to a soap opera format where how is this person feeling? Not even anyone talking to a camera. It's kind of maybe even one of those camera films where it follows people around, sneaks in on them, almost Office-esque. Kind of how Office changed as the show progressed from more of a documentary to a drama-based TV show.
Yeah. It definitely it made the transition. So it's a show about a mockumentary. It's a show about them filming a mockumentary as well as filming themselves filming the mockumentary, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually the mockumentary wraps up. So now they're just filming themselves in the aftermath of having conducted and finished the mockumentary, right?
Yeah, they're filming the making of their documentary to prove Ethan's innocence. Is that the main guy?
Right.
No, Dylan. Sorry.
Dylan. Yeah. No, and I will say I agree in the sense that it was jarring and unexpected. Because obviously in these true crime shows, it's just a documentary through and through. So when they stopped, I was a little disappointed when they stopped the actual documentary aspect. But I was so surprised and taken aback. And I think in the end, I really enjoyed how expertly they were able to make that transition, because you went from this mockumentary where you could passively consume it, like Making a Murderer, and then just kind of get invested with some of the people of notice, like Dylan and maybe some of the other bigger characters. But then by the time they transitioned out of it, you're already caring about the actual people so much that when they made that transition, now you just, for me at least, now it was just refreshing to see, okay, what are these people like outside of the lens of the documentary, and how is this documentary actually impacting them in their real high school lives? So for me, like, yeah, the transition was jarring, but I thought they did it supremely well.
I think the drama and the aftermath of it all kind of validated the whole project that it is, because you know, a lot of the show, and what was so great about the show was it was high schoolers. It was high schoolers filming high schoolers, and it was like the high schooler sensibility trying to solve this crime. So if it ended just there and we only saw it through the lens of a high school director and high school subjects, it wouldn't make me believe it as much as when I saw the aftermath and what the kids thought of it and how it affected Dylan. And you know, you kind of see, you know, the reality of after the documentary, which as a viewer, not really knowing much about these kids other than they're trying to solve the mystery of who drew the dicks on the cars. This kind of gives it a little bit more depth, or makes it feels a little bit more real at the end, at least for me.
Like, one of the things I think is implied with shows like Serial and Making a Murderer is that all of the actual impact of those shows happens off screen. You read about it after you've like listened to the whole podcast. You read about what happens, and they're reopening the case against this person, or someone filed a change.org petition to get that case reopened, or something to get investigated. And obviously, being fiction, they have the freedom to not only show you the fake documentary, but then show you the fake reactions of everything that happens afterwards. So I thought in that sense, it was a lot cooler than a traditional true crime, because they have this entire universe that they can play in. So why limit themselves to just the documentary aspect of that reality, right? Or why not escape from it? And I thought the way they escaped from it and handled the rest of it was
it's actually
pretty
really
good.
interesting now that you say that. They use the premise of a documentary to bring us into this whole world that they've built, and then you can explore that world. As the entry is the documentary, then you end up exploring all the characters outside of the documentary. And it's a really interesting way to bring people into a show with a certain premise, and then it becomes something more than it is. So
But with regards to how well they did the documentary aspect, I would say that I probably also would have enjoyed the show a lot had it ended on that note. But like, as we've seen, I think they would have left a lot on the table, because now they have these characters that we can explore outside that single lens.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm really glad that you liked it, because the minute I saw the trailer, I myself had trouble determining if this was fake or not. Like, it was obviously fake because I'd seen some of the actors in other things, but yeah, just the level of realism and the seriousness they took the subject matter was, to me, just so entertaining in and of itself. And that layer, like, I feel like that added like a permanent stepping stool of humor, on top of which everything else that they did just became that much funnier, because of it's all fake in the beginning, right? It's just someone wrote that the line, ball hairs are not going to be enough, right? You need more than ball hairs to put this guy up, right? Like, someone thought of that and incorporated it.
Two moments that really like stick out to me after I watched the show that made me like laugh out loud was when Alex Stromboli was talking about getting a hand job from that chick. And the seriousness when he looks into the camera and says that it happened at that party. It made me die. And then when Dylan, when the guys find out that, I'm trying not to give a whole lot away, when they uncover some evidence about the teacher and they bring it to Dylan, and Dylan gets super excited with his boys, and they all smoke because his crew just smokes weed, so they all smoke, and then he reminds them like, well, no, this doesn't prove anything, Dylan. This just helps your case. It doesn't get you off. You're not off. Yeah. Right. And he's like, oh man. He's like, now I'm high and I'm sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, whoever wrote that it was great. Like, very well written, very well acted.
I think the biggest laugh out loud moment for me that I can remember is when they're at the summer camp in the second or third episode, and they are investigating Alex's claims of having gotten a hand job, on the pier. Oh, yeah. And then they pull up the models, and they have the little red model jerking off a fake dick. Yeah.
Yeah. Fucking hilarious.
Yeah. Well, moving on from American Vandal, the other thing that I watched was Ready Player One. And now that, me personally, I really, really enjoyed the movie.
Did you read the book?
I did not read the book, but I saw it with my sister, and my sister did read the book. So she kind of pointed out a lot of the differences in the movie. And I will say, if you have read the book, I mean, my sister really enjoyed it too. And if you have read the book, it's a little different from the book, but not in a way that it's going to ruin the integrity of the story. It's just changing what it is. I mean, so what do you guys know about the movie? I want to be very cautious.
I don't know anything about this movie or this franchise. That's it.
I pretty much know what was in the trailers, right? Yeah. So there's this like Oasis. It's a virtual reality world. I guess it's completely inundated with elements of popular culture. So it's not like, Fortnite or a game that has just, set skins and assets or whatever. It seems like a kind of freewheeling, completely open virtual reality world. And then there's something hidden there. And I guess the evil guy who runs the corporation yet somehow will be kicked from that position once this thing is found, is looking for it. And then so are the other players playing it.
All right. Do you want me to tell you what the premise is, or do you want to like go into it with that?
I don't know. If you think it won't ruin it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really not sure on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it ruins it. It's just, I didn't really know much going into it either. So I don't know if I want to leave you guys thinking the same thing, or, give you guys like the actual premise going in. Because you're not far off, Sonny, but that's not really what it is.
Oh.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, then I think I'm fine where I'm at.
Yeah. Just don't say anything.
All right. So on that note, I really did enjoy it.
But you're saying that underlying premise is different than the one presented in the book?
Yeah, it's not off. Like you're not super far off. But okay. I mean, there is things hidden in this Oasis, and this Oasis is just this world that like people can go into that's just full of pop culture. All that's absolutely true. So yeah, just go in, and then I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Anyways, I don't want to labor on this point. Getting back to what about the movie I really enjoyed. what I think they did really well in this movie is they did the Oasis incredibly well. This world that they go into really does feel like this tangible digital universe. There's just so much to it. The complexity to it is really, really, really awesome. It's great to see all the visuals, and it's one of those movies that if you're really a pop culture nerd, you're going to love watching this movie over and over again. It's going to be a great rewatch because there's so many Easter eggs. You literally just can't deal with it. I saw it with my buddy who works at the movie theater, and he was sitting right next to me. And I mean, occasionally he would, hit me and try to like point something out to me without ruining the scene for me. But because he had watched it 3 times. So the things that he had found, and the things that he's still looking for, like there's just like so many times that you can just watch it, and there's just something will go by the screen. And then probably like the second or third time, you'll be like, oh, yeah, I recognize that character. So that's like really fun about it. What I think they do really well, too, in this movie is they address the idea of avatars and digital, our digital character, our digital privacy even. just the rules in the Oasis, and that's what it is. I mean, it's this virtual world, so you kind of get to choose your appearance and everything. And like you've seen in the previews, there's all kinds of like make believe shit all over the Oasis, and there's like a lot of these rules that kind of protect your identity. And it's just kind of an interesting aspect or element of the film that I think is really cool in today's world, especially with all the gaming and stuff that's going on. It's a fun movie. It's definitely a great movie to watch in the theaters too. It's a really fun theater experience. There was one scene that was kind of shaky and almost was too big of a screen for. It was a movie that I told my parents that I don't know if they would necessarily enjoy it because there's a lot of movement and it's very digital. But we're the generation we're used to seeing video games and a lot of that kind of mess on the screen. So it's not as taxing for us, but definitely for an older generation, I think it would be on a large screen. But it's just great. I mean, it's one of those movies that every few scenes you just like smile and laugh because they just uncovered something where you recognize something on screen. So I think you're really going to enjoy watching it. It's not a perfect story, and it definitely pulls from different elements of other stories. But I think it's really well done, and only Spielberg could have pulled it off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without having seen this movie and just seen the trailer, I feel like this is what Valerian tried to be last year. I don't know if you guys remember that movie with Carol Devine or whatever, and Rihanna.
Yeah.
I actually saw that movie, and it was visually stunning, but it was just story-wise, it was a big hole there. I did not enjoy that movie at all. But this movie, again, looks to be very beautiful, visually stunning. I'm sure they spent a ton of money on the CG and all that stuff. So I think this is definitely a movie theater experience. You think, Jason?
I mean, it was really fun in the theater, and it's really fun in like an audience, like when you're watching it with a crowd.
Yeah,
because you'll get reactions from certain Easter eggs, and that's kind of the fun of this movie too. The characters are pop culture nerds too. So they're kind of like all of us that want to go see this movie and want to geek out, and so it's great. It pays homage to the original story or the original subject matter, and it lets the audience kind of in on that too. So I think it's fun in an audience setting. It'll be a great rewatch, like I said, at home, but definitely worth seeing in the movie theater.
So one thing that occurred to me looking at the trailers is like James Cameron's Avatar, in retrospect, did a fantastic job bridging a real live action set of scenes that incorporated a lot of CG with an entirely CG world. And the contrast between the two was so like insignificant that together the entire movie just played out really beautifully, right? And there wasn't like any jarring CG or fake looking stuff. And it seems to me that like elements of that would apply to this movie where, you obviously have a lot of like CG favelas, as we saw in the trailers, with real life. But then when you get into the Oasis, it's 100% CG. Do you think they did as good a job as James Cameron did with Avatar?
Well, the seamlessness in Avatar was one thing, because when they jumped into their avatars, they were still in the real world. So, I mean, it's a CG character still technically in this real tangible world.
Right. But what I mean is like everything that we see as the audience is completely CG at that point, right? And when we looked at Jake Sully's Avatar, like we weren't thinking too hard about this is Sam Worthington, right? We just saw Sam Worthington's Avatar. And so for me, at least, it didn't bother me. It didn't feel like I was watching a different person, or it didn't feel like I was watching Sam Worthington put on a role. It just felt like Sam Worthington just completely CG'd, and it looked completely natural.
I think what you're saying is like it's so believable that Sam Worthington's character and the Avatar are both in the same universe at the same time, and there's no differences as they're translating between both characters. It feels like they're in the same world. There's no jarring visual experience with that at all, correct?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And is it roughly the same with this? Like when you get into the Oasis and you see the main characters' avatars, do you feel like it's just natural? It's just happening?
Yeah.
You feel like you're watching them act as opposed to watching them put on an act? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then the CG, like the whole environment is very rich and looks very colorful.
You want to go there. When you watch the movie, like you want to be there. It looks awesome. You can't wait for the Oasis to be built, which isn't. I think it's in the movie. According to the movie, the story, it's in 2040 or something. So I'm waiting for a few years for the Oasis.
Yeah.
It's gonna be pretty
Cross your
sick.
fingers.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
Did you watch this
Okay.
in IMAX or 3D or what?
I forget if it was IMAX. It was a big ass screen, but I don't know if it was IMAX. Yeah, I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was. I mean, my buddy got the tickets, and we were like up at the top row getting served beer and stuff. So,
But
but
not 3D.
not 3D. I think 3D might actually be too much for me personally.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Okay.
Just because there is a lot going on. I mean, you're in basically, imagine Fortnite in 3D when shit gets real. It's just like all that stuff, like flying. That'd be too much. So, I mean, I kind of enjoy. I think we've talked about it before. 3D is kind of hit or miss with me. I think there's good movies for 3D, and I think a lot of action movies are better off not being 3D.
Mhm.
I try to avoid it as much as possible. The last experience I really enjoyed in 3D was Avatar, and that was
Yeah.
what, it was 10 years ago now, I think. Longer.
And that's because they shot it with 3D in mind.
Yes.
They kept
Right.
in mind. With,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's just a gimmick, I think.
Mm.
Wait, did you watch Jurassic Park in 3D, Sonny?
I don't think so. Sorry, you mean Jurassic World or the re-release of Jurassic Park?
No, the re-release of Jurassic Park.
Yes. Yeah.
You saw that in
Neil and
3D?
my mom, we saw it in 3D. Yeah.
Yeah, how was that?
I don't remember it being like mind-blowingly better, right? By that point, I'd already seen the movie like 10, 15 times, grew up with it. Only reason I wanted to pay to see it again is because of how much I loved it from my childhood and stuff. So I don't remember anything significantly noticeable about the 3D representation, aside from the fact that I think just in general, like that when the T-Rex breaks out, I think it just felt actually, you know what? Actually, what I do remember is that it felt as real as it did the very first time I remember watching it, rewatching it in 3D. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same
That'd be
time.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you've been watching anything else, Jason? Or?
No, that's really it.
Awesome. Sonny, you want to talk about what you've been watching?
Yeah. So I've been doing, just like the background watching of a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I've watched 6 X-Men movies.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
That's
Jesus.
a lot of background watching.
I know, right? X1 through 3, and then First Class, Days of Future Past, and Apocalypse.
Dang. What's your favorite?
I'd say
Which one
don't
did you watch more and it was less of a background movie?
I'd say X2, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Actually, no, I lied. Never mind. First Class. I think First Class might be, in general, kind of my favorite of at least of these 6. I haven't seen the X-Men Origins or Wolverine or Logan in a while, so I am not counting them. Definitely, actually, I definitely liked Apocalypse a lot more the second time around. There's a lot of extra scenes. And I think if you're not too hard on the Apocalypse characters' motivations, I think it's easier with some of the extended scenes to kind of get a glimpse of what he's going for. But the bigger issue is that it seems that all the big villains all want the same thing, just mutant supremacy, right? Through some devious scheme to make it happen, whether they make everybody a mutant or they just try to destroy the world so that only mutants are left, or build sentinels to kill mutants, and then you have to fight those people, right? Like, it's all kind of just the same story over and over again. But I could definitely get behind Apocalypse's motivations a little bit more at the second time around.
That's actually I think a good point we can bring up is I think Apocalypse is going to be a good barometer for Thanos and Infinity War. Because he's the ultimate badass. He's the ultimate villain for the X-Men was Apocalypse. And Thanos is kind of the same in the Avengers world. So and he's like the big baddie that the Sentinels were from Apocalypse and X-Men, and they also and multiple times through the X-Men series kind of tease the Sentinels. Like they kind of lead up to him being the big bad guy. And I thought Apocalypse was ultimately pretty underwhelming
in the movie.
Yeah, and his character
relative to his role in the comics and in the text version of the universe.
Yeah, just as a character that they wrote him too. I mean, he was pretty weak. He didn't do much. Like the most we saw him was touching a TV screen, just going learning. Like that's all we saw him do. He's just learning shit. That's all he's doing.
Right.
And so that's what we're watching, like Forrest Gump walking around and somehow establishing like this group of villains that's going to fight his war for him. And I don't know, like he didn't even like he seemed dangerous, but not scary. And I wonder if Thanos is going to be the same way, or I hope Thanos is not. And I could see them treating it as the same, especially with him just being in one movie like Apocalypse. Apocalypse really deserves a whole trilogy.
Well, so there's two things to note but it has nothing to do with the X-Men. They have done half-hour screens of the first half hour of the movie, and people coming out of it are saying, like, this movie is about Thanos. You're going to see a Marvel movie from Thanos' perspective.
Wow.
So in that sense, I don't think we're going to get an underdeveloped villain. And I think he will live up to the potential that Apocalypse could have been. But it will just have been much more well-written and his motivations more clearly defined. And I forgot the other thing I was going to say. So
what you were saying earlier, like I barely remember X-Men Apocalypse or whatever it's called. It was such a background watch. The story was just not too interesting to me, and it didn't keep me focused in at all.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised to hear you say X2 was. Did you say you didn't like it that much? You weren't.
No, I did.
Okay.
No,
I did, but I think I like First Class the most.
X2 might be one of my favorite of the entire franchise. It's such a good movie.
I like.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, watching all of them in order, and not really in order. I watched the newer trilogy first, and then the older trilogy second. But I have a little bit more of a respect for what they did in the newer trilogy, because I think to a much greater degree than I had expected, they had stayed true to some of the characters' personalities and motivations. Like, so for example, X1, X2, and X3 all happen in the same universe as First Class, right? So everything that you see in First Class from those characters ought to be consistent with what you see in the original trilogy. And I think they do a pretty good job with that, both with Magneto and Mystique mainly.
Yeah.
James McAvoy's Xavier, I was just kind of like, whatever.
Yeah.
But those other two characters, I thought they were able to capture pretty well, especially if you kind of like squint and not really think about what happened in the actual the first universe between First Class and the events of X-Men 1.
Yeah. Also,
yeah,
X-Men Days of Future Past is more of a Wolverine movie in my eyes than it is an X-Men movie.
True.
And that's why I think I enjoyed it a lot. I just really loved following Hugh Jackman's character through that whole movie. He's
well, that movie felt like a comic book movie, because they kind of did go in weird directions in the comic books, and sending someone back in time, that kind of was something that they did. And they didn't send back Wolverine. I think they sent back Xavier in the comics. But I liked that they included that element of it, and they kind of went a little sideways with the storyline. I thought that was kind of neat.
The latter trilogy is definitely more comic booky feeling than the original one. It's not that the original took itself too seriously. It had more of the flavor of like a Blade or a Spawn type superhero movie, rather than like, hey, let's step outside the box, get a little weird with it, if we want to.
Like Sabretooth would have been a lot different in like the newer series than he was in the older series, or the original series. Which Magneto did you like better? Do you like Fassbender or in McKellen?
McKellen's a classic, man.
Yeah,
Fassbender does a great job as well.
He did great, yeah.
You can really see his motivations and his during the newer franchise.
I think in the latter two of the newer trilogy, Fassbender's Magneto, I had a hard time like sympathizing with him. Like in Days of Future Past, he tries killing Mystique, even though like thinking that would somehow solve the problems of the future. Well, obviously it didn't. And then he kind of just joins up with Apocalypse, and then at the very end switches sides for no real apparent reason, right? Some of that stuff I couldn't really get behind. So in that respect, I think Ian McKellen's Magneto is a lot more consistent, but that directly stems from not having too much of a backstory, right? You can just throw characters into some part of their lifespan, and as long as you don't expand on how they got there, you can kind of say that they're the way they are for any particular reason, right?
Well, I think Fassbender's had more of an arc, or they attempted more of an arc, and Kellen's was just he's the bad guy. So
Right.
he's the bad guy, and he has some redemption that he cares for Xavier, but
Right.
beyond that, he's just the villain. He's there.
Yeah.
He has one purpose that he serves in every movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was really nice is in X3, Pyro says something like, "Oh man, if you'd given me the chance, I'd have killed Xavier myself," or whatever, after Jean Grey kills him.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Magneto says, like, my only regret is that he had to die in order for our vision to come true.
Right.
And taken by itself, you're just kind of like, oh, well, sure, they have a backstory, they have a history, we don't really know much about it. But then when you start incorporating their relationship from Days of Future Past and from First Class, it really like gives way more weight to saying that, right? Like you definitely feel like they were a lot closer than what we were given in the original trilogy, which I thought was nice.
This franchise, I think, has a really unique opportunity to become something more. So now Deadpool is loosely related in this universe, and if they keep adding and building on some of these Marvel characters, they have something that Disney has. I guess X-Men is owned by Fox, or is it owned by...
It's owned by Fox, which is owned by
now
Disney. Now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they have the monopoly on the
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they have a really interesting opportunity where they could have maybe built up the Apocalypse and built him up as a Thanos and brought in a lot of these other characters. I can't really speak on it because I'm not too familiar who else besides Deadpool really fits in this universe, but I feel like they could bring in a lot of Marvel characters and make a really rich universe and history, as they did with, they started with First Class, how it tied back into the original series. Especially Days of Future Past. I think that was really solidified how it ties back into the original. But I'd be interested to see where they take the direction with this franchise.
I would love to see like the third Deadpool be the movie that bridges the MCU with the X-Men universe.
Yeah.
Both because like they're now properties owned by the same parent company, but because Deadpool is like the character to kind of step outside or like break the fourth wall while doing it in a non entirely ironic way, right? Or entirely non-ironic way. You know what I mean when I say that? Like he breaks the fourth wall as a gag. Right. But at least now he can break the fourth wall as a gag and still get people hyped about what's to come because he's doing it for the bigger universe.
The interesting thing to me is X-Men was always kind of the more sci-fi, fantastical comic book. These characters did some weird stuff, like you were saying before. They're traveling back in time. It would be cool if the next phase of I guess it would be Marvel. I mean, would they bring them into the Marvel, or they keep them separate as X-Men? But I mean, I guess like the next phase, I would love to see them go more into a fantasy and sci-fi element, kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy, but just with these characters, because I think it lends itself a lot more. It's a lot more believable when you have weird mutants that look different and have really like crazy psychedelic powers. It'd be neat to see that like taken, because again, that's what they did with the original. I mean, X-Men was so deep. Like you could really start over like multiple times. Like you could reboot the franchise with a whole completely different feel, because there were so many different versions of X-Men and they just went in so many different directions. Like that is subject matter that does lend itself to different iterations, which would be really cool. Like you said, Akasha, they picked that up and kind of rebooted.
The only thing that bums me about all that is that Hugh Jackman won't be a part of it.
I know. I don't know any
right?
Wolverine other than him. Yeah. He is so good at that role. He looks
yeah.
I mean, fuck.
And what a badass for just doing it for the fans. Because he didn't want to do it all the time, but he did it because he knew the fans loved him. That's what a badass. He's just such a good dude.
I think Logan was a really good send off for him. Put him, leave on a high note, and he killed that role in that, with that movie. So, so Sonny, anything else you've been watching?
Oh, dude, I've got a shitload. Let's see. Okay.
Rattle them off.
I watched Mark Felt, The Man Who Brought Down the White House, which is about Mark Felt, who I think only a couple years ago officially confirmed that he was Deep Throat and leaked information to Woodward and Bernstein at the Washington Post, I believe. The information of Nixon's involvement in the Watergate.
I see.
That one I was kind of watching in the background, so I don't have too much to say for it, except for that, like, I mean, I like Liam Neeson. I thought he did a good job. I think the movie, it's definitely not as good as like All the President's Men, which was Robert Redford and I think Dustin Hoffman, who played the journalists. But it was a decent like political thriller.
Did you watch The Post? Is there a reason why you decided to watch that movie?
Yeah, I had watched that because I found the story interesting and I wanted to watch Liam Neeson. But then after that, I got in the mood and I watched The Post, and holy shit, what a circle jerk that movie was! Jesus Christ! Like so many lines were written for Trump or written as commentary for Trump that it was just. Yeah, it was almost insufferable. There were multiple moments throughout the movie where they show women, like young girls and teens and people, women in college, literally looking up to Meryl Streep. As when I say that, I mean like she'll be walking down the stairs of a courthouse through a crowd of somehow just only women, and they'll all just be literally looking up to her, right? As if like they could not have sold her role and her I guess her like challenge of being the owner or the manager or whatever.
Editor-in-chief?
I don't know if she was just the editor-in-chief. Like I know that apparently the Washington Post was her family's business. Okay. And they were trying to go public or raise money from banks or whatever. So that was like a big point of conflict, is like, if we release these papers, will we lose our investors, and then will the paper eventually go under and whatnot. But it was just so undercut by all of current event political commentary that it really it took away from the story quite a bit. But otherwise was entertaining. Bob Odenkirk was just a classic chill Bob Odenkirk character. It was cool getting to see how like excited and involved all the journalists were with the Pentagon Papers. Like they really do sell you the magnitude and significance of such a thing happening. So that was really interesting and easy to get behind. But again, like they destroy all, in my opinion, all of the goodwill they earn by just saying like, oh, well, it's the press shouldn't be caring about what the president says, or, the press needs to operate independent of the president and shit like that.
So did they use the expression
using a different situation as an analog to what's happening now, and just to make a political comment?
Totally. Yeah.
Did they use the expression fake news?
No, but they
said it at any point in the movie.
No, yeah. But they did mention how like Nixon, they included little audio vignettes. Like you'll get a shot of the White House and you'll see Nixon behind the blinds in the Oval Office, and then you'll hear audio. And I think it might actually be real audio from Nixon, because he taped conversations in his office. But it would be things like, oh, that guy from the Washington Press, I don't want to ever see someone from the Washington Press at our press briefings ever again, and shit like that, right? And it's obviously just done because you can imagine Trump saying the exact same thing, right? Yeah, so in that sense, it was just kind of that. But as a period piece, it was nice and it was interesting.
I could just see them having like Nixon being like, "These guys are bad hombres."
Right? Yeah, exactly.
These guys are bad hombres, I say.
But in terms of a film, it's like a solid Spielberg joint.
I guess, except I don't really associate Spielberg with these kinds of movies. I didn't see Lincoln, so I don't have a good glimpse of how he handles more period piece dramas. I mean, I guess it's like.
Did you see the other?
I don't know.
Did he direct the other movie with Hanks during the Cold War? I forget the name of the movie.
Bridge of Spies.
Bridge of Spies. I'm not sure. Let me confirm that he directed
that. Road to Perdition.
Yeah, that's one.
I believe that was also Spielberg. Yeah. I definitely. I'm more of a action and heavy drama. Sorry, not heavy drama. Action and thriller fan of Spielberg's than his strictly dramas. Like as evidenced by, I haven't seen Road to Perdition. I haven't seen Lincoln. And I haven't seen like, what was it, Polar Express, or.
Bridge of Spies is actually a pretty decent Spielberg joint. I actually enjoyed it. Yeah.
Okay.
Which one?
Bridge of Spies.
Yeah.
Let's see. I saw another movie called The Invitation.
Okay.
Have you guys heard about this one?
No,
You
I
seen this?
haven't.
Heard about this?
Mhm.
Okay. Invitation has got the poor man's Tom Hardy. What's his name? Logan Marshall Green.
I gotta look this
Um,
guy up.
yeah, look him up. He looks exactly like he's like an American Tom Hardy. Um, looks and almost sounds exactly the same.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah,
I didn't even have to type in a comparison of like Tom Hardy. The second
yeah.
picture on Google Images of him side by side with Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy, right?
Hilarious.
Yeah. So this movie is about a guy, and his girlfriend. They go to his ex-wife's house, for a dinner party after not having seen her for like 2 years or something like that. And it's. Can I ruin it for you?
Yeah,
I
go
That's
ahead.
guess
fine.
Oh,
it's.
wait a second. I've seen this movie.
You have?
Yeah, I've seen this movie. It's on Netflix. I've seen this. Yeah.
It's on Netflix. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sonny.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, before you go on, Jason, are you cool with him ruining it?
Yeah, no, let's just ruin it. Yeah.
Okay. So the story is so he goes to his ex-wife's house. What you learn is that him and his ex-wife, like, she I think has psych issues,
Mhm.
like a very tumultuous marriage they had. Not tumultuous in the sense that they fought a lot, but like at one point their child dies
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah.
And she, I think, tries to commit suicide or something like that. And it ends up having a very adverse effect on their marriage, such that they get divorced and they haven't seen each other in a while. So they go to this dinner party. He is coping in his own way. We learn that she's coping in her own way. So we meet her like new husband or new boyfriend. We meet some of their friends that they met in South America or in Africa or something at this like retreat about how to handle grief and trauma and stuff. But the entire movie is undercut with this strange uncomfortability and the protagonist's main skepticism for the motives of his ex-wife and her new husband. Like, for example, when the new husband lets people in and out of the front door, he locks it with the deadbolt and then takes the key.
Yeah.
They're acting like super hippie, super, happy, but like faux happy. And they do a fantastic job of just filming it from his perspective, where you can't tell if it's his paranoia and inability to handle his own version of grief and then see how other people seem to have handled it much better, or if there's something to his skepticism. And at different moments, like, so at one point they invite their friend, and then the game that they play, the little icebreaker game, is like, tell us what you actually want. So one of the friends, that there's a girl, is like, oh, I want to let everybody know that I love them. And then I also want to kiss this random girl, like a girl she's never met before, friends with everybody except for this new couple's friends. And she just starts making out with her. And you're just kind of like, oh, okay, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then one of the guys is like, I want to tell you about my wife. And then he talks about how like he loved her and they had a great marriage. And then at one point they got in an argument. So he hit her in the head with something and she fell and died. And then he went to jail for a couple years. And then like now he misses her. And then people are like, what the fuck kind of a game is this? Like, what are we playing? Right. Then at another point, they show a video from the like cult leader that they met in South America and how he talks about grief. And it's a video of this woman dying, like literally dying. She's in her bed and she's like crying and she's a little sad and she's talking to the cult leader, and then she just dies. And that's it. And everybody's like, why the fuck did you show us this video? Right? Like, everybody gets uncomfortable, but then everybody kind of bounces back. And it's this main character, Logan Marshall Green, who's just permanently like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I'm really skeptical. And then it turns out they're all in a cult. They're all trying to perform some murder sacrifice. And luckily, he's able to kill his ex-wife, her husband, and then their two friends. And then they escape. And what they learn is that this was some major cult event. So, and they know that because the husband hung a like red lantern in the backyard. And when they go to the backyard, I think they're in LA in the hills, so you can see the whole city. You see red lanterns all over the place, and you hear sirens and helicopters and shit. And then the movie ends.
Did you feel the movie was building just to that last moment? Everything that it was doing, that's the biggest impact of the movie, was just the last moment.
No, for me, actually, the biggest impact of the movie was the validation. Like
Okay.
for me, I thought a whole point, like the whole shtick behind the movie, which made it really interesting and intriguing to me, was the fact that they really played the "is he crazy
Yeah.
or is something going on" angle. They played it really fucking well.
It's
Yeah,
also
and then at the last 15 minutes ends up just becoming like escape from the house, kill who
right.
you can kind of thing.
Conceptually, it's also interesting how they present the idea that like a group of people can show you some fucked up shit, but by groupthink they can just normalize it and then have you
Hmm.
pull you right back in, which is an interesting aspect of the
Yeah.
film, in my opinion.
No, at one point he wants to leave. Like he's very overt about leaving. And then he pretty much starts like going on a
Yeah.
tirade insulting them, right? He's like, I don't know what the fuck you think you did. I don't know how you're handling it. I'm handling this thing completely differently, but I don't know what you guys are on about and like what you're up to. It just doesn't feel right to me. I want to leave or whatever. Then he like and then all of the friends that are there, they sense weirdness, but not to the degree that he does, right? So
Right.
they kind of exactly as you said, that like they renormalize
Right.
the events and they bring him back down. Yeah. And then at one point, oh, actually, the kicker is that at one point they pour out some port and they're all going to cheers, right? But this is right after Logan has seen some video from the cult leader talking about how, like, there's an important event coming up. This is, we're building to this. This is what this has all been about. So he knocks the glass out of his hand and his girlfriend's hand when they're about to drink it. And then at that point, like, it's high climax because he's already ranted. He's already been a kind of a party pooper the entire night, and he's apologized for it. And so, like, when you see him do that, you're just like, holy shit, he's like now officially OG ruined the party,
Right.
and they're gonna hate him forever. But then you see one of the girls who drank the cup starts having a seizure, and then you're like, holy shit, he was right. And then they try helping her because they don't suspect any wrongdoing. And then the husband pulls out a gun and shoots one of them. And then you're just like, holy shit.
Yep.
He was right the whole time. And everything this is now a survival movie, right?
Yeah.
And then it plays out the way a survival movie does, with the exception that they don't kill the black person, which was strange. Because, that like never happens in horror movies.
Yeah.
But man, yeah, like everything leading up to that moment, it was so cathartic to see him get validated while also immediately transitioning into a completely different class of horror and thriller. Yeah, so I didn't care too much for the ending, but I loved getting there. Like, this was a perfect example of how you tell like a really compelling story, and you really get an audience involved, because the entire time I was just as uncomfortable as he was. Like, you have to imagine these are the kinds of people that like have suffered their own versions of extreme trauma. And we know her trauma because it was her kid that also died, right? And to see them handle it the way they are, it's just so off-putting, that you kind of almost know that you've either met people like that, or the stereotype of people that are just trying really hard to put on a front, but you don't know why or what the angle is. God, and they did a really good job.
Awesome.
Yeah, so let's see, what else did I watch? I watched Body of Lies. It was Russell Crowe and Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
It was, forgettable, whatever.
Middle East or something. I think I remember that movie. It's very forgettable.
I rewatched Heat.
Oh yeah, it's on Netflix now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great movie.
I'm telling you. Huh?
One of the best action movies ever filmed.
Such solid action. It really made me want to play like Fortnite and Grand Theft Auto, because it was so like grounded in like the urban combat realism that they were trying to sell. Robert De Niro plays your classic Robert De Niro character. Al Pacino plays a hilarious Al Pacino. You guys saw that video I posted, right?
I freaking
He's
love
got
Al
a
Pacino.
big ass, and you've got your head right up it. It's so good.
Infinitely rewatchable, that scene.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And Val Kilmer, he's just like, a very low-key, like, I don't actually know what Val Kilmer's personality is like, because he does a fantastic job of getting immersed in a role. But his role was good. And yeah, man, they just they do the urban crime big heist stuff and the action scenes phenomenally well. Like I don't know if this movie won awards for sound effects or if it's just really critically acclaimed for it, but like one of the highlights of the movie is the fact that all the gun sounds are like they're loud and they pop.
Yep.
So when you hear them firing an AK at like a cop car, you're not just hearing like boom, 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 and then like there's other things going on. You're like, it's like you're watching the bullets hit the car and you're feeling the impact. Right? The minute the bullet leaves the barrel and hits the car, like the sound effects are phenomenal.
Great
and then
sound
as
design.
a result,
I'm sorry,
sound design. Yeah,
great
exactly.
sound design.
Yeah, sound design. Yeah, and then in total, it just adds up to really high stakes, but otherwise simple, like action scenes and heist scenes.
Like this is probably one of my favorite movies. I mean, I've been to LA just visiting. I've never lived there, but one of my favorite movies, this and Collateral, probably my two favorite movies shot in LA. It just gets a city. I mean, the city feels lived in, and it actually is I don't know. It's the environment. You can feel it in the movie. It's really well shot and well done.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. It's like it's the kind of movie you don't really need to rewatch, except for just like, oh, okay, this is a great action movie. Let's just put it on. There's not too much depth to the story and stuff that you need to be involved in.
I think a good way to describe it is like if it's on TV, you could just easily get sucked into a scene, and like it has great scenes you can jump in and out of. So it's not something you'd have to start from start to finish. You could just pop it on TNT or something. Yeah,
and again, it's pretty much the town, except in LA instead of Boston.
Yeah,
and with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino instead of Affleck and John Hamm.
Just any excuse to use the word Affleck, Sonny.
Yeah, so let's see. I think that's all I watched recently. I also watched a couple horror movies, but I can't think of their names right now. So
yeah, I recently actually
watched.
Speaking of horror movies, the only movie that I've recently watched is The Strangers.
And the second one.
Yeah, it's the second one. I think nothing special here, right? About a typical gore movie. I only saw it because I had Movie Pass, so that should tell you something. So not really worth watching. But I haven't been watching too much because I want to talk a little bit about Fortnite, guys. So we've been playing. Well, Jason played with us for the first time last night, but Sonny and I have been pretty into Fortnite. And Sonny, tell me what you think about Fortnite. Your experiences with the game.
I love it.
Yeah.
Like I think it's I played a little bit after I think I logged on about 5 minutes after you guys had left.
Yeah.
Or logged out, and I just started playing by myself in some random squads. And yeah, dude, I mean it's fun, but it's like it's incredibly stressful. It's both simultaneously fun and incredibly aggravating.
It's insanely frustrating but addictive.
Yeah. I think I just like the idea that like we can roam around in a world and we probably have to level up our own squad communication skills or like our own individual urban combat skills, and then we get to leverage this element of building things, right? So we can try to build ourselves our own height advantages or defensive advantages.
The ability to build on the fly adds a completely new element to a game that I have never experienced, and that in itself is, if you're able to do that, it's so impressive. I don't know. I mean, I see guys you see all these hack videos online of guys just falling from the sky and building their way down as they just make their way, going down to ground level or whatever. It's just insane to watch them do that. Hope to be that good one day.
Right. I don't. One of the most interesting aspects to me of the game is how the animation style is like very child friendly.
Yeah.
But the nature of the skills required to be good in the game are no different than any other like more serious take on a shooter genre, right? I feel like if you were good at Rainbow Six and if you were good at collabing with your teammates to hit some target, that's exactly the kind of skill that you can develop and leverage in this kind of game. And that's actually the aspect I'm looking most forward to, is not strictly just how do we build better or how do we survive longer, but like how do we leverage our own skills and our own ability to like spot an enemy, flank them, surround them, and then target them, and in the and be continually adapting to the circumstance, right? Just through our own communication. I think that makes the game a lot of fun, but then also makes it really, really difficult, because then when someone's better at you, they just kill you and you're kicked out to the lobby, and that's it. Yeah,
and there's a lot of tinkering and stuff. I think I'm still learning with the game in terms of controlling sensitivity and just the way the mechanics. So there's a learning curve, but once you start playing, you just get hooked. It's hard to stop. It always ends up being with one more, guys. Just one more. Just one more.
Especially when they can end so badly.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Sorry, Jason.
I think it's the repeatable nature of it, which I think is really good. I mean, playing for my first time yesterday, I mean, it's a ton of fun, like you said, because you have two different skills. You have like the building and you have shooting. So if you're not good at the combat aspect, you can just get better at building, and you can still like contribute in a big way. And it and it is like a survival game too, because you're constantly like moving and you're kind of forced into these zones that have other enemies or other players. So I think it's just multiple games kind of brought in one, and as soon as you die, you get out and then you start over again, and it just kind of starts back up. And what I was really blown away by too is, I mean, looking at the game, and you start off, you have like this little pickaxe, you build stuff. It looks like a kid's game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you get into like the shooter mode, and it feels like a really good first person shooter. And they have like bullet drop, and they have like these elements that are like good elements of a first person shooter mixed in with this like cartoonish type of world. So I mean, I definitely see the appeal to it. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to spend money in the game, but it's like an amazing game for it being free. It's a really good free game. It's incredible.
Well, that's the thing, though. You don't have to spend money to get better at the game. The money aspect is purely cosmetic. It's to get skins and different backpacks, costumes, all that stuff. So to get better at the game, it is skill based. So it's just a matter of you getting better at the game mechanics.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think we're going to wrap up with a little bit of Westworld talk. So Jason, you want to kick that off? The premiere is actually next Sunday. So
April 22nd.
In 8 days, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So I guess we're going to start getting into Westworld similarly to what we did with Game of Thrones, which is great because it is such a deep and tangible universe that you can really kind of get into, and there's a lot of fun conspiracies and things like that. And I don't know about you guys, but I actively avoided Reddit the first time I watched season 1.
Same here.
And we're kind of validated in that recently the production crew of Westworld put out a teaser trailer that they actually were really giving to Reddit and basically saying or acknowledging that like you guys caught on way too early. Like all of you guys figured everything out. It was basically like a spoiler zone if you went to Reddit. So they were going to give this like preview that was going to explain season 2 so they could like get away with the fan theories of what season 2, like they were just going to kind of put it all on the table and be like, this is season 2. And as you start watching it, it was interesting as fuck. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I was like, it was awesome. It was kind of like something about it was a little off, but it was awesome. And then next thing you know, they fucking rickrolled their entire fan base and just had Dolores, what's her name? Evan Rachel Wood singing Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. And then they followed it by like 25 continuous minutes of just a black and white footage of a dog sitting in front of a piano while the theme of Westworld played. It was beautiful and it absolutely hilarious. So I don't know about you guys, but that got me like actually really, really pumped for season 2. And it made me really excited that like even the writers and producers acknowledge that there's this community that just is just like too smart for their own good too,
Yeah, right.
But I really want to ask you guys, because actually I got turned on to Westworld because of Akash. I saw you one time and you were telling me about Westworld, and I didn't have HBO Go or any account. And so right after you told me, I got my parents' account and I started watching it, and I fell in love with the show. But I want to know what you guys thought of the show. Because I don't know about you, I had a different perception of what it was going in than what it was going out, even when people explained it to me. So I really want to hear your general reactions of just season 1 and then of Westworld.
Yeah, man. we've been seeing this recent theme of like artificial intelligence and the human's ability to create life, and then what that means. That concept really was what pulled me in to the movie. And then since that, we've seen we've seen Blade Runner, we've seen all of these Black Mirror episodes, but that whole concept is what pulls me in. And then that being set in this theme park, and the way that they build up mystery, and the entire plot. I mean, the way they build up the story is what really keeps you hooked. And I think that is what is the selling point of the show, is the writing. You never know what's going to happen. Amazingly casted. Anthony Hopkins plays one of the best like mysterious roles that I think he's done in a while, since maybe one of the Hannibal, where he's just creepy yet like unassuming kind of at the same time. So there's a lot of things as to why I like the show, but probably one of the major is the whole sci-fi thematic aspect of the show. It really pulls you in, and it keeps you hooked, man. It's that, I mean, they have a whole community online just guessing what's going to happen. So that should say enough about the show, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I forget how. Maybe I think Akash also got me into it. I was just generally intrigued because, like, I'll watch any movie that tries to do something interesting with tech and takes it seriously enough to make a compelling story without making it the end all be all of the complexity of the story. Yeah, so for me, going into it, it just kind of became clear that this was about how they are going to become self-aware. And I think the angle that they took for how they do that is really interesting from a story perspective. Also, you guys may not have noticed this, but so, you know, I write JavaScript, right, for a living. That runs in the browsers, and there's this framework called React where you can use it to build web apps and stuff. When they show you code that's running in the AIs, it's React code for some reason. Like you can read it. It doesn't really make sense in the context of artificial intelligence, but I thought it was really interesting that they incorporated that. And that alone for me was like, okay, yeah, this show has at least some semi-serious people working in tech, consulting or something. Definitely all of the sci-fi elements of like the infrastructure of running the park was fascinating, just and so visually stunning, like how they build the robots from that like thread by thread, and then from the goop to make the skin and stuff, and how they program them and fix them up and put them back out in the park. I thought all that was just really interesting. They definitely created a really fun immersive environment, like a Pandora type environment where you just wish it was real and you can't wait to go.
I also think, I don't know, it's really interesting, the concept, and I think we might be as a society like heading towards this, like what does it mean to create life and then control the actions of the things you create, and them also being a lesser being than you, when if you look at it genetically or as material, they're identical to you, yet we created them. I think that concept and that thought process is something super interesting, and I think it's what we'll be talking about and discussing as a society as we get more advanced with what we're working on, and AI gets there. Like it just poses a really interesting future, kind of in the same vein of Black Mirror, but
I was just gonna say it is like Black Mirror in the sense that they're showing technology that's like kind of not, I mean, this is a little bit more distant future, but kind of not so distant future in an overall sense, and it's exploiting like our like man's greed in a way. It's a place where all these people go and they do fucking horrible things to the hosts, and that's an element that helps free the hosts. Ultimately, it gives them that sense of humanity that like humans aren't giving them, you know. So in a way, it's showing Black Mirror in a Black Mirror sense. It's like the capacity we have to do like terrible things, or the places that technology will allow us to go. And I thought they did a really good job tying that into the ultimate goal of the show, which is, you know, Dolores and the rest of the hosts, you know, waking up and becoming conscious. You know, honestly, after 3:10 to Yuma, I wasn't really into the Wild West kind of stuff, but after 3:10 to Yuma, it really like completely turned me on to the idea of like a Westworld setting or a setting in the Old West. So this show was like such a really cool idea, bringing in like a futuristic element into that Wild West atmosphere that they did so brilliantly, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to visit that place, I hope that place exists, and I hope I have 40 grand a day so I can spend at Westworld. And what seems really cool, and what happened in the movie, I've been still wanting to watch the original, is there's multiple of these parks. So I'm really hoping that we kind of get to explore, and from what we've seen in the previews, there will be a little bit of exploration into like Samurai World and some of the other parks that they had, because it seems too good to be true, and it seems like that is the direction that we're facing, is like an oasis from Ready Player One. Just we want to go to a place that we can leave reality and become like something completely different. And I think the show just punctuates that so perfectly with the host trying to become conscious. I mean, it's just so well written. It's a brilliant idea.
I think the whole samurai part was something that they came to the writers' table like towards the end of the process, because as the show is being presented to you, like you just see Anthony Hopkins just completely involved in the Western portion, and they're expanding that world and all that stuff. And then feel like at the end they're like, hey, wait, we should maybe introduce that there's more to this, because you don't really see him involved in the development or the expansion of any of the other worlds during the first season. So it feels like they're like, fuck, like, hey man, this might be like, we might have something on our hands. Let's kind of add another world here and expand our story instead of just being contained to one setting. And that's, when I say setting, I mean like the Western setting or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, but it is based on original material that did explore other things besides the West. So that's the only the caveat I would have to that. I mean, I agree. It is kind of like, yeah, then where was he? Like, how come we didn't see like samurai shit in his office? We only saw like Wild West stuff in his office.
Right.
But I always just took it as that was like their first project, his pet project. And I think ultimately he had more ties to Dolores and kind of the original hosts than he did, the later hosts, I guess. I mean, but again, that's all implication from an audience. It's not anything that they gave you through the show.
Mm-hmm. I will say I'm not as excited currently for the second season as I thought I would be. The reason is the first season did such a good job setting up this universe and then setting up like an overarching question, or a set of overarching questions. Like, what is the role of the Man in Black? What is he trying to do? Who is the Man in Black? What is the thing that will wake them up? What will they do once they've woken up? They did such a good job answering some of those questions that the questions remaining don't really appeal to me as much. Like I feel like learning how they liberated themselves is way more interesting to me than watching what happens once they liberate themselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward, ideally, to them asking bigger questions, broader, more mysterious questions. Because if we don't get that, then I worry that it might kind of devolve into your run-of-the-mill, stretching a story out,
What I'm hoping doesn't happen is they just build out a ton of seasons of this, and we ultimately end up that these hosts are in the normal world, like the human world. Right. And it's just like a conflict. Like I would hate to see us removed from the park. The fun of this story was the park. Being at the confines of the park.
If it becomes a Blade Runner part 2 or like 2049, like essentially what that movie was, then it's not gonna be impressive at all. I mean, that's been done before.
Yeah,
I don't want to see that.
Yeah, so I think I would like to see a major plot element be staying within the park and figuring out that there's more to escaping the park than just Dolores like killing someone, right? Yeah. Like there's way more to what needs to be done than just that. Because if it ends up that that half the battle's over already, then I don't think it would make for very compelling TV in the same vein as what they had set up in the first season.
So, I mean, to that, did you guys see the twists and turns that was coming in the first season? And do you think that they can or should follow that same route for season 2? Do you think it would spoil it a little bit if they just were like, oh, it's another twist again? They've been misleading you the whole season just to, unveil it.
In terms of twist, do you just mean how they were representing 2 timelines the whole time?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what they're,
I don't think that's reusable.
Not as a twist. I did see that actor who plays the young Man in Black.
Yeah.
In the trailer. So I suspect they'll continue to explore how he became more and more of the Man in Black and what he did in his early days. Yeah, but it just obviously won't be done from the perspective of like, oh, there's a twist. It'll just be, I think, for more expository purpose or exposition purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, because my fear is I'm going to go into the season 2 and I'm just going to be looking for all the little Easter eggs, and then I don't know if it's going to be to my benefit or not. So I don't know if it's like that misdirection is ultimately going to be good for me in the season, or if it's just going to kind of like cloud my judgment of it, because I'm just like looking for, you know, how are they trying to get me? You know, how are they? You know, what's the parallel timeline they have in this season?
You'll be the happiest if you go into any film or media with no expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just go in
that's
just
true.
blind.
Well, I mean, luckily they haven't really given us a whole lot, or at least I haven't watched a whole lot else beyond that, beyond them rickrolling us. I mean, so it sounds like, Sonny, you're not ultimately that excited about the show.
Just because I don't know how, like, what made it so appealing. Like, even in the first episode, you realize, okay, they're at a park, there are AI, they can be remotely controlled, they can die, but then be brought back. So then the big question in the first episode is like, who's a bot and who isn't?
Yep.
You kind of suspect Dolores is a bot just because of how hokey she acts.
Yep.
Then you learn the Man in Black is not. He's not like a scripted villain. He's like a fucking real villain, right? And then as the show progresses, you're trying to figure out what is the actual relationship between Teddy and Dolores. Then as it continues, you're like, okay, what's the Man in Black trying to accomplish? Why is he killing all these randos? And what are they going to tell him that we don't know or that he doesn't know? Yeah, and then it finally ends with like learning Bernard is a bot, and there's a path that they've been on this whole time that you maybe didn't know existed, but you can finally see at least a big part of the path at the end of the season. And for season 2, I don't know what the path is. Like, I see shots of Dolores and Teddy roaming around on horses, but the first question that comes to my mind is like, what? Why? Like, are they gonna hang out there? I guess they don't need to eat or drink or sleep even, right? So are they just gonna like live that life or try to make it work, and then something's gonna happen? Or
the opening scenes are going to be crucial. You know, opening scenes will be crucial in this one, just to set the tone of, where do we go from here? Last time we saw them, they were just killing people. Yeah. So, you know, what happened? Yeah, what happens now?
I mean, is Arnold still alive? Like, I guess.
No, I think he's dead, right?
I mean, yeah, I think he's dead as well.
He got shot in the head.
Right, but I mean, you don't know if that was him or if that was a bot he put in his place, right? Like, it's so fucking difficult to understand, like what's there, and I don't have even enough to work with to hypothesize in a really positive manner. All that we have available to us is a lot of shots of a lot of what's seemingly real people getting killed by bots, and so from that, I'm like, I want more mystery than that, and I don't think they have teased at any of the overarching mysteries yet. So for that reason, I can't get super psyched. Aside from just the fact that I can't wait to be back in Westworld and continue seeing what's happening. But for me to sink my teeth into it, I want to see some like, what is the bigger problem? What is the bigger mystery going on here?
From the loops that we saw, because this park was just like something you felt like you could get lost in. What was a loop or a challenge, or what was a storyline that you would have wanted to follow if you were in Westworld? Like, what character's challenge would you jump on board with?
Oh, I don't know. I would probably join the bank robbers, like join a gang.
Yeah, Lazo, dude.
Banks.
Yeah, me too, man. I go hang out with Lazo. He was cool.
But at the same time, I would also definitely join up with the people hunting them, like the people hunting the bad guys too. Like, I feel like I'd go to the park twice and do both.
Well, you could do one each day, right? Because then they just forget you the next day. Those were great elements too. I love that they didn't recognize things from the real world. Like, when the first time you see Dolores say that to the little boy, those visitors, and he's like, "Are you one of them? Are you one of them too?" And she just is confused. She doesn't know what he's saying. I thought that was such a neat addition to the story. They just don't recognize, and it's a great mechanism for like they figured out the logistics of this part was real. The programming that would go into some of these AI was like really interesting. Yeah, they shouldn't recognize the outside world, or else maybe they will start asking questions. Or
Right.
that was really great.
The line, it doesn't look like anything to me, is one of my favorite lines of 2017 and maybe even 2018, depending on how this season
chilling,
goes.
right? It's like kind of bone chilling.
Yeah. Honestly,
every
I don't think
time
I would go on any of the adventures in the Western world. I'd probably jump to Samurai World and do something over there. To be honest.
I think there's also a space world
Oh.
that in the original ones. I don't know if they
Future
teased
World.
at it.
Yeah.
Future World. Yeah.
Future World.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd kill in Future World.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I wish if Future World was like Rick and Morty, that'd be cool. Yeah.
That would be crazy. That would be awesome.
Like really weird looking hosts, that'd be cool.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all my thoughts on season 1. I mean, I'm excited for season 2, so hopefully we'll be diving more into it, and I'm looking forward to seeing the theories that we develop and whether or not they're true.
Yeah, and definitely, please let's try to make a pact not to read Reddit.
I was just about to say that. Let's all
okay,
agree right now. No Reddit till the whole series is done, and it'll just be our original thoughts and reactions.
Now, I remember it around episode 3. I came back to Houston and I was talking to your sister Kavya.
Yeah.
And she was telling me, she's like, "Oh yeah, I saw a theory that like the Man in Black is actually just William in the future."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Fuck, that makes so much sense." Yeah. So I had to watch the rest of the 7 episodes with that in the back of my mind, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah. As soon as she told me she was on Reddit, I said, "Don't even tell me anything more. Like, just silence, please. No more."
Dude, the first time so I watched the show 3 times. I've seen it 3 times, and the first time I watched it, I just went down and wrote down all these questions that I had, and then when I was done with it, I went through Reddit, all the episode threads, and I answered all the questions, and then I had even more questions, so then I wrote down more questions and watched it again, and then I was watching the second time, I went back to Reddit to check. So I did like 3 times where I wrote questions, checked my answers, and I want to do that again for this season. So I want you guys to kind of like.
You should write down those questions, and we'll put them on the internet and post them in the show notes. So
okay, let's see if
we
what
have
people's theories.
a record of what your questions were and how it progresses as the season goes on. That'd be kind of an interesting experiment we could run as we watch the show.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Cool, guys. If you have no more thoughts, let's wrap this up.
Yeah, dude. Let's do it.
Yeah, guys. Thanks for listening. You know where to find us. nocamspodcast.podbean.com. No, it's Podbean, right? My bad. Oopsies. .podbean.com, on Twitter at nocams podcast, and you can find me on Twitter at acashshow902. Sunny, do you want to tag yours?
Yeah, Sunny _Gunna.
Yeah.
On Twitter. Yeah.
And Jason's not on social media. So, all right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Akash.
I'm Sunny.
Jason.
Bye-bye.
Peace.